Hello, everybody, to the webinar with Renzo Pozzo, the Italian scientist who realized a study about the jumps in the 2021 Udin Jump Development Meeting. Now, let me introduce Mr. Renzo Pozzo. Good evening, Professor Pozzo. Thanks for being here with us, and I let you start your lesson, your analysis about the competition of January 2021 in the Udin Jump development in Udine. Thanks, Mr. Pozzo. Here to you.
Thanks a lot for the presentation, and I will come in with some results we made in the analysis of the last year competition. And these are the staff who participated to the recording data, and me is this name, and this is my email. You can write them to me as you like. We will discuss a lot about the classical parameters you can find in several articles and several reports made by the ERF. The contents of my presentation are this: the methods of the data collection, the results of the competition for the men, the comparison of high levels versus moderate jumps in the men category, and the comparison between men and women. I will refer to results published by the ERF reports on London 2000, the World Championship indoor from London 2017. So I will give you some data about this, but you can find this, of course, in the homepage of the ERF. This was the setup we used. We used 3 video recorders. Each attempt was manually digitized to obtain kinematic data, and we have for each attempt, for each jumps, at least 2 cameras. We have to digitize every frame, and for every frame 70 points in order to get this kind of segments. It means the model, link model, and to calculate the center of gravity. So, and we analyzed the phase beginning with a 5th last foot contact. It means totally 4 steps, but we will refer to the last 3 steps as usually in these reports. So we get a lot of information. This is an example, for instance, of Poroshenko, the jump, invalid jump, the second at 2 meter 32, and we can have a lot of information, so we can put the cursors and we see the 2 camera shots and some parameters. This is, for instance, the velocity, the vertical velocity, and this is also the vertical velocity, but not only from the center of mass, also from other segments, the free segments, both the hands and the free knee. So this is for him, and this is the same thing from for the woman Mahuchik, and of course you can see a normal speed as well as you can move the cursor, and this is very useful when you are you would like to see in some phase, some particular phase you are interested in to see what are the values of the parameters you will see, you will analyze. But of course, we choose the classical parameters in the classical events, in classical phases, and we put tables which we will now present to you. But this is a very interesting, a very useful tools for trainers and coaches when they are accustomed with this kind of analysis. The results of the competition were this: this is the schedule of the competition for the men, and we in red you see the jumps we analyzed. So for Prochenko, we analyzed this jump and 3 jumps invalid at 2.32. For Zayas, we analyzed this jump, and for Castro Rivera, we analyzed 2 jumps invalid at the same height as Zayas. We also, in order to compare very good jumpers with a moderate jumpers level, then we also analyzed this fellow, this athlete, who jumped 2 meters 4 valid and 2 jumpers invalid at 2.8. For the woman, we analyzed this Mahuchik and Alexia Trost, and this was the jumps we analyzed: valid, valid, and invalid for Mahuchik, and valid 93 and 96 to invalid for Alexia Trost. So now we begin to have a look about one of the most important parameters, which means the run-up velocity. You can easily recognize that, that Prochenko has, first of all, I have to apologize. All the values you will see on the vertical velocity, they are overestimated. Please don't compare these values with the values you find in the EIF report, because our values are about 20% overestimated. I don't mention why, because it was a problem and it took a lot of time to correct this, but keep this in mind. And on the other hand, it doesn't matter, because if we compare now these athletes for this competition, then the differences are valid, of course. So you can recognize that Prochenko, in all these jumps, he was able to maintain the velocity, the run-up velocity, very constant, and a level, very constant level, until the third last step. These bars means the contact time. This is the time and this is the velocity. So this is touchdown for the fourth last takeoff. This is the third, this is the second, and this is the last one, the takeoff, the very important contact time. And this is the moment of the jump. So you see that these levels is somewhat higher than this. But the most important thing is to recognize that he began to slow down, of course, because he must transfer this energy, this velocity, horizontal velocity, in a vertical velocity. He began to slow down here at this moment. Whereas the other guys, they began to slow down early in the phase, in the steps, in the contact time. So it means that he is able to maintain this run-up energy as long as he can until the very last contact. This is the vertical velocity profile, always in terms of time development, and you see how the vertical velocities is going up and down to 0. That means lowering and increasing the velocity, the vertical velocity during the steps. And of course, during the last step, he reached the maximal vertical velocity, which again, please, I apologize, these values are absolutely overestimated with respect to the EIF. So, and you see that in terms of analysis of all this data, we can make this consideration. And of course, we also have to know the values. these are the values we detected according to the classical way to present this, as you can find in the reports of IAF. Horizontal velocity has this suffix ho, and vertical VA, and TD means touchdown, and TO means takeoff. This 2, 3, and 4 means the second last, the third last, and the last, the penultimate and the ultimate contact time. And these are the horizontal velocities at touchdown, at takeoff, and this is the vertical velocity. These two parameters are interesting, and the velocity transfer, as defined from other authors, is the change in vertical velocity from touchdown to takeoff, the change from vertical velocity to touchdown, takeoff, relative to the horizontal velocity at touchdown during the takeoff phase. It means the difference, the ratio between this difference to this velocity. And we know that this parameters is one of the best parameters in order to evaluate if the jumper is efficient or not. So in terms of transform the amount of horizontal energy in the vertical velocity, and this is the one of the most important factors to have a successful jump. If you now look what happens for Poroshenko at this attempt, then we recognize that he has very high velocity, horizontal velocity, but the lower vertical velocity at the touchdown, at takeoff. And of course, this parameters is corresponding to this behavior, the smaller one. And keep in mind that the best results in the world, the best jumpers are able to have more than 70% in these parameters. So that was one way to, this is the one way to recognize that there was something not good in the preparation phase. There is a clear difference of the velocity of the vertical velocity between Poroshenko and the other athletes. If we compare these values at touch, takeoff, we recognize that the average value here is significantly higher than the other athletes. So the other athletes were not able to get the same level of takeoff velocity, vertical velocity. And of course, also these parameters is different. You can easily recognize that these athletes have a smaller value. As I mentioned, it should be near 70 or more or higher than 70%. Now we have a look to another classical parameter then is the height of the jump of the center of gravity at different phase. H1 at TD, at touchdown, H2 at takeoff, H3, it means the maximal H here of the trajectory, and then these two other parameters we will discuss in a couple of minutes. So we can easily recognize that the maximal age of the center of maximal age of the trajectory of Poroshenko were higher than for the other athletes. So it was able to get a higher center of gravity parable for the center of gravity than the others 3 jumps. This is the first constatations. The second is that the difference at the takeoff, this is not so huge. And this means that, of course, these athletes are anthropometrical, have the same configuration, around almost the same configuration. It means that this this higher parable is due to the higher velocity, vertical velocity. This peak location means where is located the maximal, the age 3, the maximal, the highest point of the parable with respect to the bar. If the value is positive, it means that the point, the maximal point, the vertex is in front of the bar. And if it is negative, it means it's behind the bar. And you see, if there is 0, it means that it's perfect on the vertical projections of the bar. This is typical of the jumps of Barshim, for instance. So you see that with this respect, there is a small variation for Poroshenko, and the huge variation for Castro, because in one jump is 2 centimeters in front, and one time is 10 centimeters in front. The other parameters, the other parameters is the difference, vertical difference of the hips. This is the hips, not the center of gravity. This is the hip, and it gives information how light, how easy is the clearance of the bar. So as higher this value is, as easier the jumper was able to go above the bar. These values are really similar to those found in the reports of the IAF. Now we will have a look about another parameter, very interesting, very important. It means the length of the steps. Why? Because we know that every jumper in the flop must have a structure which should be stable, and this concern the length of the steps and the curvature of the trajectory on the flow, and we will show also these angles. So now have a look to this parameter. So Poroshenko show a constant structure of the length in the first and in the second step. So you see the values are very similar in all the jumps, whereas a tendency to a significant variation is detected in the third step. So the third step for Poroshenko is this step where he changes the length. Castro make this change more also in the first step. So this is interesting. The second is similar. The last is also changing, but it was a significant change in the first step. And Zaya show different variation of these parameters. if we now make this in terms of histograms, and we make the difference between the first and the second, so these values are the same of the table here, and we make now the difference, the second to the first step and the third to the second step, then we get this kind of result of representation, which is easier to understand than these numbers. So again, you see that Poroshenko was able to maintain a very small difference between the first and the second step during all the jumps. He changed this difference in this jump and this jumps with respect to the last jumps. So this is the huge difference. So between the third step and the second step. So we can see that he is stable in the in the first two steps, and not so stable in the last step here. That's why the difference is going in this way, not stable. Same consideration you can do for Castro Rivera, but in the first step, in the first difference, means with a reference with the first difference and the second difference also. This is interesting because it gives us information about which kind of parameter is stable, much more stable, and which kind of parameters is changing during the competition. And this is one of the most important factors in order to recognize which kind of parameters has much more importance, or which kind of sensibility every athlete has in order to reproduce these structures. The other two parameters are the takeoff distance, this distance, and the takeoff angle measured due to the calculation of the vertical and horizontal velocity. Again, we see that, we see that these parameters, these values are in line with those of the reported in EIF for London 2017. And we can see also that this parameter, the takeoff angles, is some like small, higher than those reported in EIF, but not so significantly higher. Now we have considered the classical parameters of the trajectory on the floor, and there is two most important angles. One is referring to the center of gravity, and one is referring to the foots. We calculated, as reported in the EIF, these angles, and you see how is calculated the angle from the center of gravity. At every time when the foot is in the takeoff moment, we calculate through the parallel to the bar and the line connected the position of the center of gravity at that moment, takeoff moment, and the position it will have, it will reach during the crossing the bar. For the step to bar angles, we connected the point on the floor with a line between the two foots, one at takeoff, the second, and the third contact, the last contact, of course. And we calculate, according to the definition, these angles. So now we have a look with the same values of the EIF report. So if we now look the exact angle of center of mass, we recognize that the values here are in the first and the second. They show similar or slightly lower values compared to the EIF report, according to the best results, not to all results. I'm referring only to best results. These are some like a little bit smaller, but on the other hand, some of these are quite similar to other athletes. The decrease between the fourth and the first, this is these parameters, is the decrease between the fourth and the first. And this decrease is much more higher in these jumps than in these jumps. So it means that the curvature is different for these jumps, referring to those jumps here. If we now compare the other parameter, again, we show lower values during the third and the fourth contact. Here, they are slower angle compared to the best of London. So the most relevant variation of the curvatures is provided during the last two steps. So it means that the two last steps are the most important in our case for the variation of the curvature, and these values are smaller than these. One of the most important criteria is the inclination of the body and of the legs in both plane. This is the classical anterior-posterior plane, and this is the so-called leaning inside, sideways, or lateral medial plane. So, and of course, we know that these two mechanisms, these two angular momentum and energy, are the most important parameters in order to have a high velocity and to clear the bar. And this is the revolution of course, of the flop technique. So now we have a look. We define in this inclination slightly different, in a different way compared to EIF report. We, in each plane, we define the line between the shoulder and ankle and the hip and ankle with respect to horizontal line, not to the vertical line in both planes. So if you make the difference between these two angles, you get the inclination of the trunk. And as small this difference is, as aligned is the jumper to one segment. And it is interesting to see how some very good jumpers are able to maintain this alignment. So now have a look to this. Poroshenko in the anterior-posterior plane have a small difference between leg and body. It means that he is very aligned in terms of quite similar to a stick, to a single segment. Also, Zaya has this kind of tendency. Whereas the Castro have a much more pronounced difference. So it is much more upright with a trunk, referring to the leg. On the lateral medial plane, Poroshenko show a smaller value of the legs compared to the other athletes. It means quite the opposite tendency to with reference to the anterior posterior, and it means that the his leg is much more inclinated to the floor. And this is interesting because it is inverse to this tendency. Now, one of the interesting question which is posed by each coach is how much flex should be flexed the knee during the takeoff. And we will see this now. We see that the takeoff, the knee angle at touchdown is quite different from in the jumps of Poroshenko compared to those of the other athletes. So the difference is interesting, is significant. And the difference also significant in the lowest value, the maximal flexion. It means that Poroshenko show higher values, have a tendency to have an extended leg in both phases, in the touchdown and in the lowest values. So it bent less than the other athletes. What is this kind of parameters in the report of the EF? And you see, these values are really significant difference to these values, and also the lowest. So in order to better understand this, if we make the difference between touchdown and lowest value, we have the how much the knee is bended. So we made this difference, and we see that the difference is for our jumpers, analyzed jumpers, is significant smaller than those jumpers. This is interesting. And you see also here the performance, as is quite similar to the performance we analyzed here. So now we have a look to a comparison between good jumpers and a lower level jump. So we analyzed, as I mentioned in the beginning, the jumps of Dalzion. He was able to jump valid 2 meters 0.04 and 2 attempts, invalid attempts to at 2.08. But look, he was able to have a horizontal velocity very similar to these guys, who again they were jumping 2 meters 24. And also in the vertical velocity, we saw not so huge difference. The maximal velocity is the same. Why is this guy jumping so lower? The reason must be in other parameters. So, and of course, we find this a reason, a possible reason. When he is taking off, at the moment the takeoff is high of the center of gravity is 1.2, 1.3, 1.3, and look, these are the highest height of the center of gravity for the guys who jump at 2 meters 24. It means that this difference is referring to the fact that he was not able to reach higher jumper. And you see this is the reason, because he jumped the maximal high of the center of gravity was 2.760 and so on. And here you see the difference. So, but we saw also that he has a good pH difference. It means the difference between the vertical difference between pelvis and the bar. Then again, why he was not able to jump to meter 10, to meter 8? The difference must be again on the quality of clearance ability. And you can see here the difference. He is able to make a bridge, so, but he makes and the right in not the right timing, and he put down the gluteus too early and touch the bar, hit the bar. You see the difference here between his clearance ability technique and the clearance of Zayas, who has a higher rotational energy and is clearing easier the bar at 2 meter 24. The posture of the body is clear, then is flying over without problems in rotational energy. He has problem to fly. He has not so much rotational energy, and he must make these movements. And he hit because he must keep the knee early in the vertical direction. That was the reason. And if you can give some a hint to the coaches, then is to better perform the rotational energy at takeoff in this plane. Now we have also a possibility to compare the woman and the man. So we have now here the horizontal velocity of Poroshenko, Castro, and Zaya, and we have the corresponding velocity of Trost and Mahuchik. Please pay attention that the maximal value are different. Here are 8 and 9 meters per second, and we have here only 8 and 8 meters per second. What can we recognize now? As mentioned, he is able to maintain until the very last step a very high horizontal velocity. But she is able to increase this, and this is very interesting because it means that she has the Mahuchik, she has a very instinct to increase the horizontal energy, and to do this you must also be able to have a great transfer of this energy in the vertical direction, and she is able to do this. In really, we can see now the same facts for the vertical velocity, and we recognize what is a so-called average acceleration. This line indicates the inclination of the vertical velocity, and as much more inclinated this line is, much higher is the average acceleration of the takeoff, vertical acceleration. And you see that both the Poroshenko and the Mahuchik, have the same inclinations, whereby this athlete, Trost, the inclination is significant smaller, so she could not have the same acceleration. Now the question is, why is Mahuchik jumping only 2 meter, 2 meter 3 if she reach very high level of vertical velocity? And the reason, of course, is because she is making a jump, the height of the center of gravity at takeoff is significantly lower than the guys, than the people as Castro and Zayas, because they are taller, of course. And this difference, 1.5, 1.45, 43, 40, is the reason because she is not going so high. B, because she is 1 meter, I mean 1 meter, if I don't be wrong, 1 meter 78, something like this. Another thing which I can see you is the coordination, as I mentioned, about of the legs. You know that a very good jumper is an athlete who is able to use not only the power of the jumping leg, of the pushing leg, but also the impulse coming from the free segments. If you make a very high acceleration, vertical acceleration of the free segment, it means hand and the leg, the free leg, the free knee, and you make also at the right moment and in the right direction deceleration, then these transform this deceleration in a upward impulse on the center of gravity, on the center of mass. And you see that exactly what is happened for Poroshenko, who is able to make the maximal vertical velocity of the both hands and the free knee exactly just before the center of mass reach is maximal vertical velocity. Now look the same fact for Mashchik, and you see that she has a great difference compared to the profile of Poroshenko. She is not able to make the same high levels of the free legs, and of course, this leg, the internal hand, you remember she is making not the swing with both arms, but only with the one, with a external, with a left arm. The other arm is pushing, is keeping in the direction of the bar. So she has a great amount of power in the legs. And this could be also a very interesting things when you compare jumpers and you have to decide which kind of improvement you are going to make with your pupils, with your athletes. So this work is dedicated to a special person who I knew very well, and he was able to make some dreams too. Alessandro Talotti. Thank you for your attention, and I am free for questions.
Thanks to Renzo Pozzo for this lesson, this webinar, very interesting data. I think that some of our guests want to do some questions. I think I see online Enzo Del Forno is the youth Italian squad coach. Enzo, hai qualche domanda? Do you want to have some to do some question to Renzo Pozzo?
Deve essere piena. No, io scusatemi, sono anche arrivato un po' in ritardo e naturalmente ho apprezzato molto quello che è stato fatto, è stato detto anche da Renzo Pozzo. Mi è piaciuto molto questa analisi, anche perché ha fatto dei raffronti anche con sia maschili e femminili, ma anche con atleti, diciamo così, non prettamente top level oppure d'élite, ma anche con qualche atleta che è di terra nostra, ma è anche così, diciamo così, ha delle misure che possono essere interessanti, ma limitate a livello nazionale. È uno studio questo che si avvicina molto a quelli che tempo addietro erano stati fatti anche da Peña. Comunque Renzo ha approfondito molto di più quelli che sono tutti i sistemi e tutte le velocità, sia di rotazione orizzontale che rotazione traslazione sull'asticella. Mi ha dato, diciamo così, io ho fotografato un attimo, se permetti Renzo, tutte queste cose perché vogliono vedere anche con più calma, ecco. E sarà per me un grande piacere anche poterle analizzare nei giovani che avrò. Ecco, io non ho domande su queste cose, anche perché sono un po' limitato per quanto riguarda la lingua inglese. Avrei preferito magari parlare un'altra lingua piuttosto che inglese.
Vabbè, se hai una domanda comunque la possiamo tradurre, Enzo.
Possiamo tranquillamente fare questa discussione in italiano, perché ovviamente è logico che ci sia un contatto diretto con gli interlocutori, quindi non ho nessun problema, anzi, a rispondere. Quello che dice Enzo, che lo saluto caramente, è una cosa interessante. Io questo rapporto ho già stilato un rapporto scritto che secondo me dovrebbe essere a vostra portata, perché è stato consegnato a Mario Gasparetto da parte nostra, da parte del nostro staff universitario. Quello che volevo aggiungere è che queste analisi che abbiamo fatto non sono le prime. In effetti già a Lignano anni scorsi, nel 2005, 2006, 2007, abbiamo avuto la possibilità di analizzare questi dati, questi atleti, e cosa era venuto fuori, in poche parole? Quando si ha la possibilità di analizzare sequenze di salti al top di un atleta, e lo si fa più di qualche volta nelle condizioni molto simili, ci si può accorgere di una cosa molto interessante. Quali sono i parametri che un atleta mantiene sempre costante e quali invece cambiano? Ora, dal punto di vista della matematica, questa è una stupidaggine, perché qualsiasi numero in matematica viene elaborato. Invece, se ragioniamo in termini di quello che vede, e come ragiona un allenatore, tutti sappiamo per esempio se la velocità di rincorsa è un parametro importante o no. Certo che è importante, e vogliamo anche sapere quali sono gli atleti che riescono a mantenere questa velocità costante o no. La cambiano o non la cambiano? Se la cambiano, perché la cambiano? Ora, noi in quegli studi eravamo riusciti a capire che alcuni atleti presentavano in alcuni parametri fondamentali, per esempio la velocità, grandi variazioni, o invece erano capaci di mantenere una costanza. E questo lo potevamo vedere a seconda se analizzavamo il penultimo, il terzultimo o l'ultimo passo, e così si capisce quali sono le differenze negli atleti. Vedete qua sono degli esempi, per esempio, no? Questo atleta è un atleta che mantiene costante sempre questo angolo, in tutti e due gli angoli. Questo atleta, il nostro carissimo, era quello che in quella gara lì, ma anche in altre gare, cambiava spesso questo angolo. Questo è un modo per riuscire a ipotizzare, diciamo, quale può essere più o meno la parte, i parametri, le cose che l'atleta riesce tendenzialmente a mantenere costanti, e quelle che invece vengono modificate da lui consciamente o inconsciamente. Perché questa la domanda è: lo fai apposta perché lo vuoi proprio modificare, o non riesci a mantenerla? Questi sono i due aspetti dell'interpretazione, e qui naturalmente è l'allenatore che gioca un ruolo importante, perché questa è solo pura, fra virgolette, semplice numeri, matematica, ma riuscire a capire la causa, il motivo e l'effetto, la differenza fra la causa e l'effetto, questo è un altro paio di maniche, ed è l'allenatore allena non questi parametri, allena il sistema sensomotorio, e dovrà produrre una struttura più o meno stabile, ovviamente. C'è un bellissimo filmato di Barshim dove si vede esattamente come questo signore è in grado di comportarsi al momento dello stacco, dell'impatto, no? Come un segmento unico. Un modello, fra virgolette, meccanico incredibile, cioè ha una stabilità, una stiffness dinamica eccezionale. E non è basso, è altino, pesa poco rispetto agli altri, ed è per quello che dovrebbe più o meno nel futuro prossimo fare il record del mondo. Io ho qua l'analisi, il filmato del 2,46 che praticamente lo aveva già fatto, solo che aveva staccato leggermente troppo lontano dall'asticella, no? E su questi ragionamenti su questi parametri possiamo ragionarci molto. L'importante è però avere una filosofia di interpretazione, altrimenti siamo schiavi della tecnologia, e questo non è come Enzo sicuramente lo sa, non è l'arte di allenare.
Beh, sì, scusa Renzo, io volevo dirti una cosa. Tu stai analizzando quelli che sono i top, naturalmente, perché staccano distante, staccano vicino, e le variazioni della velocità negli ultimi tre. Poi naturalmente rapportato a quello che è il settore giovanile, le cose sono moltiplicate a potenza degli errori. Comunque una cosa è questa, e bisogna tenere ben presente che tutti i salti devono avere una rincorsa in progressione, il che vuol dire quello che tu hai analizzato negli ultimi tre sono, quindi le velocità che sono negli ultimi tre devono essere tutte in progressione, e quindi ne deriva anche che c'è un'impostazione corretta sia dell'angolo anteroversione che verso l'interno della curva, che l'atleta riesce a mantenere e quindi anche a verticalizzare. Ma questi fattori, il perché, poi andiamo a vedere dal punto di vista, se vogliamo farlo così, dal punto di vista di un atleta che merita attenzione, o il perché bisogna farlo, perché il perché non riesce a fare cose, bisogna analizzare la partenza. La partenza com'è? È mezzo piede avanti? La partenza viene fatta da fermo, oppure c'è un avvio? L'avvio è sempre perfetto? I primi passi sono troppo veloci? Meritano attenzione nella distribuzione? Quindi quello che faccio prima, se è fatto bene, gioca a favore degli ultimi tre, oppure se la prima parte è fatta male, come deriva la seconda parte? Tutte queste sono cose che naturalmente già a volte un atleta top non riesce a fare. Figurarsi l'attenzione che deve porre un tecnico.
Enzo, ti fermo, scusami Enzo, ti fermo un attimo, perché il tuo audio è pessimo e facciamo veramente fatica a capire quello che
sono messo male, allora scusa.
No, comunque,
niente, sono messo male, non intervengo.
No, ma non ti preoccupare, più o meno abbiamo capito l'ambito di intervento nel quale tu hai voluto porre l'accento. Facciamo rispondere al professor Pozzo e poi vediamo se ci sono anche altre.
Quello che ha detto Enzo è una cosa, sì, è un fatto risaputo, ed è una delle prime cose che un allenatore riesce a capire, riesce a comprendere senza grossi strumentazione, quale: se un saltatore, tutti i saltatori, se non sono in grado di percepire cos'è una accelerazione, cos'è una rincorsa in accelerazione, tendenzialmente non sono saltatori. Non c'è nessun grande saltatore che non abbia questo istinto, che non presenti questo istinto. In tutti i salti che noi conosciamo, tutti i 4 i salti. E per cui sono parole sacrosante quello che dice Enzo. Ed è ovvio che a livello giovanile una delle cose su cui si fa molto attenzione è riuscire a comprendere, riuscire a migliorare la percezione di questo ritmo nell'atleta giovane, il quale deve per forza di cosa riuscire a capire quando deve accelerare, come deve distribuire questa accelerazione. Io vi rifaccio vedere questo bellissimo grafico, no? Venuto fuori. Ecco, vedete, questa è di nuovo la Maciucic, no? Scusatemi la pronuncia, che dimostra questa tendenza impressionante ad aumentare la velocità di rincorsa perfino negli ultimi 3 passi. Questo è magnifico. Penso che non ho visto mai questi dati che sia Barshim, come penso anche il coreano Wu e un altro che non mi ricordo più il nome, abbiano questa tendenza. Impressionante, perché farla a 2 metri per 2,40 m vuol dire essere sicuri proprio di avere nel proprio corpo la capacità di resistere a questi enormi impulsi che devono essere trasformati poi in sollecitazioni verticali. Se non abbiamo tempo adesso, ma si può vedere dalle riprese laterali, si può vedere come per esempio il bacino ceda molto nel piano frontale, ceda molto nella Maciucic perché ha un impulso impressionante a terra, e come ceda poco in Barshim, per esempio, il quale è anche in Poroshenko. Poroshenko è capace di avere una stiffness dinamica incredibile. Questo vuol dire tutto un discorso di talento, ma soprattutto di preparazione, ovviamente.
Perfetto, molto bene, very good, grazie al professore Renzo Pozzo. Professore, può riproporre l'ultima slide con i suoi contatti, così chi voglia approfondire, chi voglia avere a disposizione anche il modo di contattarla. Thank you for the attention and for the question. The email address of the Renzo Pozzo is there. You can read it, you can write to Mr. Renzo Pozzo. Professore, grazie per questo webinar, è stato super interessante, very interesting data, very interesting webinar. Grazie a tutti per aver partecipato.
Grazie a voi per l'invito.
Grazie professore, grazie a tutti.
Arrivederci.
Arrivederci, grazie.